Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling a huge question, one that economists and leaders have been trying to crack for centuries. What actually makes a country wealthy? It might seem like this big, complex puzzle, but it turns out there's a fundamental recipe for success. And today, we're going to break it all down. Have you ever looked at the world and just wondered, why do some economies take off like a rocket, while others seem stuck in place? It almost feels like some countries have found a secret recipe for prosperity, right? Well, today, we're opening up that economic cookbook to see exactly what those ingredients are. Okay, so every great recipe needs a core formula. And in economics, that formula has a name: the production function. Now, don't let the name scare you. This is really the heart of how we understand economic growth. I know, a formula. But stick with me, because the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Think of Y as the final dish you're making. That's the country's total output. It's GDP. To make that dish, you need your ingredients. So K is for capital. Think of that as the kitchen equipment, the ovens, the roads, the factories. Then you have L for labor. These are your chefs, the people who do the work. These two things, capital and labor, are the absolute basic building blocks for any economy. So, we've got our two main ingredients on the counter: capital and labor. Let's take a closer look at them, because there's a third, almost magical ingredient that can completely change how the whole recipe turns out. So first, you've got capital. That's all the physical stuff, right? The factories, the machines, the highways, the internet cables. Then you have labor, and this is super important. It's not just about how many people are working, it's about the quality of that work, their skills, their education, their health. Economists have a term for this. They call it human capital, and it is unbelievably critical. But remember that letter A from our formula? Well, this is the secret sauce. This is technology, and it is a total game changer. Technology isn't just another ingredient, it's a magic multiplier. It represents all the new ideas, the better ways of doing things, the innovations that make both our capital and our labor way more productive. It's how we learn to get so much more out of the same stuff we started with. So, when you put it all together, you see that growth isn't just a one-and-done thing. It's this constant cycle. You're always accumulating more and better capital, you're developing smarter and healthier workers, and you're pushing for those technological breakthroughs. But, and this is a big but, none of that happens in a bubble. The whole process needs a solid foundation, and that's where high-quality institutions come in. Things like the rule of law and property rights. Without that stability and trust, the whole recipe just falls apart. Now, if the production function is the recipe, then governments often end up playing the role of the chef. They have this whole cookbook of policies they can use to try and tweak the ingredients, stir the economic pot, and hopefully make the final dish even better. And when you boil it down, governments really have two main playbooks. First, there are demand-side policies. Think of this like a short-term sugar rush, stimulus checks or cutting interest rates to get everyone spending money right now. It can give you a quick boost, but for real, deep, lasting growth, the focus has to shift to this supply side. And that's all about making the economy fundamentally better and more efficient at actually producing things over the long haul. So what do these long-term supply-side policies actually look like in practice? Well, we're talking about things like investing in education and training to boost our human capital, or spending on new roads and bridges to build up our physical capital, or funding research and development to chase that next technological breakthrough. You see how it all ties directly back to improving the core ingredients from our original recipe? Okay, so this all sounds great in theory. The recipe makes sense. But does it actually work in the real world? Can following this recipe lead to truly dramatic results? The answer is a resounding yes. We have seen some absolutely incredible growth miracles that prove it. I mean, you just have to look at the economic miracles we've witnessed in countries like China since the 1990s, and more recently in India. Their explosive growth didn't just happen by accident. No way! It was the direct result of a deliberate, focused combination of massive investments in capital, huge leaps in education and skills, opening up to new technologies, and making major policy reforms. They followed the recipe. We've looked at all the different parts of the recipe now, from capital and labor to policy and institutions. But If you had to pick just one thing, the single most important ingredient for success in the long run, what would it be? Well, the real key is that all of these things have to work together, like a system. It's not a buffet where you can just pick one or two. You need the capital to build things, yes, but you also need the skilled people to operate it all smartly. You need the technology to innovate, and you absolutely need strong institutions to create a stable, fair playing field where all of this can actually happen. If you let one of those pieces fall behind, the whole system starts to drag. So at the end of the day, what is the most important ingredient of them all? Our source material is crystal clear here. Look, adding more machines or more workers will give you a boost, but eventually that boost fades. The true unstoppable engine of sustainable wealth is getting smarter. It's that continual improvement in technology supported by stable, reliable institutions that allow great ideas to grow and flourish. So there it is, the recipe for economic growth. Pretty straightforward, right? Which, of course, leaves us with one last massive question. If we basically know the recipe, why isn't every country a roaring success? And that's where things get really complicated, tangled up in politics and history and culture. But as we've seen today, knowing the recipe is always the first and most crucial step.